evening and welcome to the African Weekly Talk. Today we have to start this program on another very solemn note because of the death of the former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, who was killed by a deranged gunman in Japan whilst he was making a campaign speech. That's very, very unfortunate, especially considering that Japan, hardly do you hear about gun violence in Japan. But unfortunately, you can never escape these things, no matter where you are. So we send our condolences to the people of Japan, and hopefully this thing doesn't happen again. Now let me get to British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson resigned amid a lot of controversial things, especially with regards to style of government. And pretty much he's been taking it from both sides in England for some time now. But eventually, from the reports, he was caught up in some lies, and that did him in, because in the parliamentarian system, the government is controlled by the members of parliament, pretty much. So when you start losing the trust of the members of parliament, then unfortunately, you have no choice. You have to go. So eventually he decided to resign. And that is what great democracies do. When the president or the prime minister realizes that he can't have a hold on the governing of the people anymore, he does the honorable thing by resigning. Then you look across the ocean to Sri Lanka, where you have the Rajapaksa family, the president Rajapaksa, who is still holding on to power. After almost more than a month, about 2 months of demonstration by the citizens, he still wants to hold on to power. And finally, this past weekend, the citizens protested and were able to get into the presidential secretariat. And he had to be escorted out of that building. This guy, he's been facing all these protests for the past almost 2 months now, and he still wants to hang on to power. That's a shame. And he wants to hang on to power because, one, his cronies and his corrupt friends and families are telling him he shouldn't leave. He should stay. Regardless of what is going on, even though he has lost confidence among his own citizens, he still wants to hang on to power. But that's what bad democracies do. And this is the problem with most African countries as well as third world countries. Now, I was reading an article in the Economist magazine this past weekend, and had a headline in it which said Chile's bad constitution. And I was like, hold on, Chile's bad with a constitution? Chile is not the only country with bad constitution. You have a lot of countries, especially in Africa, and especially in the third world. The so-called third world countries who have very bad constitutions. And most of these countries' constitutions have to be amended. So this particular article drew my attention to a manifesto that I had written. It's been a while, that I penned it down maybe about 6 months ago. And I decided, I'm going to talk about this today. This has to do with pretty much African countries and the diaspora countries in the Caribbean. And looking back at our history since independence, through the military coups, and then finally in the early 1990s, when most African countries decided to transition to democratic system of governments, you can tell clearly that the politics systems in almost all of the African countries have failed the African people and its citizens. There's no two ways about that. I bet you guys listening to this program today will concur with me on that. At least 90% of African citizens today will concur that the party politics system have not helped Africans. It has failed Africans miserably, and there's no two ways about it. The party politics system has become a tool of corruption. It has given these parties the green light to stealing from its citizens. It has become the interest of the parties to drive their agendas without the consent of its citizens, which democracies are supposed to do. So the question I ask myself and I ask my fellow Africans is, for almost 30 something years now, since we transitioned to electoral democracy, if the party policy system has failed us, why are we still in that system? Isn't it about time for us to get rid of this party politics and go to direct independent representations? Anyway, what I mean by party politics system is that most of our governments have these parties that through their parties we elect our representatives and then we elect our presidents. But like I said earlier, this has become the tool of corruption used by the party bosses and the parties in power to enrich themselves at the expense of their citizens. And it hasn't helped us. It hasn't helped us in any way. So why are we still doing party politics? Let's get rid of it and replace it with direct independent representatives. And I did a video a couple of weeks or a month ago where I talked about, even in the United States of America, the first president was elected, George Washington was elected not as president of either the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, or the Whig Party, or the Federalist Party at that time. He was directly elected by the citizens of America. There was no party politics at that time. So you go and then you vote for the person based on the ideas that person have presented to the people. Now, that is where I think we Africans have to go now. We have to move towards direct independent representation. And with direct independent representation, that means we are going to vote for our members of parliament or members of Congress, depending on how you call them in your countries. We are going to vote for these members directly without no party labels. So what do we have to do in the first place? The first things we have to do is simple. We have to have a referendum. Because remember, this is not going to be an easy task. Because the party politics system is entrenched in our societies now. This is the bread and butter of most of these corrupt politicians. This is how they eat and they drink and they drive their big cars and loot your money. So they are really, really entrenched in this system. So this is not going to be easy. It's going to be a tough battle. You know? But the first thing I will encourage most African countries to do is that set up these civic societies, which has to be non-aligned. That means you don't align with no political party. Because if you're a civic society and you believe in the welfare of your citizens and for the country to be a better country, don't align with no political party. And then we're going to push for a referendum. Because the referendum basically is going to put this issue on the ballot for the people to decide whether to do away with the party politics system or to stay with it. If the country in question decides to stay with it, then that is the people's choice. You have no choice but to keep it. But in other words, if citizens of another country decides to do away with it, then you get rid of it. Because that is what the referendum is about. For the people to choose which way to go in terms of how their countries are going to move forward in governing. So, this party politics system, in my opinion, and I think in most of African citizens' opinion, I would say about 90-something% will agree that has been a big time failure. The only people who disagree most likely will be the politicians, the corrupt politicians who have been in office, but this is where they get their money and this is where they have enriched themselves. So they wouldn't let this thing go. They wouldn't let it go. They will fight tooth to nail. They will fight tooth to nail to defend the party politics. But it is up to the citizens, because you are in a democratic society, it is up to the citizens to decide which way to go. Because for almost 30-something years now, since we transitioned from dictatorial form of government to democratic electoral democracies, can anybody pinpoint any successes in any of these African countries economically and as well as socially to its citizens by this party politics, other than these party politicians enriching themselves? There's nothing there. There's nothing there. Remember, when you build roads, which is good, they're infrastructures, it helps to develop economy. You build nice glass buildings, which is good. There's nothing wrong with that. But the core of a development of a country is the social amenities that the citizens of that country benefit from. And if you look at most of these African countries, look at the level of poverty that we still have in Africa. Look at the level of poverty. I mean, if you look at the level of development up to this day, in this modern world, you still go to a lot of these African countries outside of the main cities, capital cities, and a couple of main cities. Everything else is still primitive. Basically, it's underdeveloped. So, if you're going to make an argument, a real argument, then the party politics system has failed miserably. It has failed Africans, and it's about time we move away from it. We move away from it. Now, I'm going to present, like I said, some part of my manifesto that I did about 6 to 8 months ago. I've had it down. Did it some time ago. And I'm going to present some of it. And in my presentation, I'm going to talk about, I know how people will feel when you talk about anything like in terms of changes. Nobody wants changes. Okay? But sometimes you need changes to make your life better. Sometimes we need changes to make our societies and our countries better. And this is where we are. So we have to bite our tongue and try this experiment. Remember, this is not even an experiment, but it might be an experiment to most of us in Africa. But like I stated earlier, the first US president, George Washington, was not elected as a member of any political party in America. He was elected as President George Washington. So this has been done. That's how America started. The party politics came in later. And he himself, George Washington, warned against party politics. He warned against it when it started to take shape in America. He warned against it himself, that they are going to be corrupt, vigorous, unenterprising, and at the end of the day, it's going to hurt the citizens than anybody else, because the parties are becoming clubs, and that's what they are. And the only interest that most of your representatives right now have in your party politics is the interest of the parties. Look at your members of parliament or Congress, whichever way you call it. They don't have you, the citizenry, as their goal to find solutions to your problems. They go there to represent the interest of their political parties. That is what they vote for. They don't vote for you guys. I mean, look at them. There was an incident in Ghana recently where they had a representative that they had to do everything to get her to come and vote for a bill. And she was pulling her legs because she wasn't interested. But eventually she had to go and vote. And she voted because of the party. She had to align with the party. You know? And that is why it's been a failure. Because at the end of the day, your interest, the constituents' interest, is not what the party, the parliamentarians go in for. They go in for the interest of the party. And that is why it has been a big time failure for Africa. Even in America, there are problems with party politics. You know, it's kind of corrupt. But still, I mean, it's way, way better compared to most African countries. So when we talk about direct independent representation, basically, this has to be amended in your constitutions. That's how it's going to start. There has to be an amendment. Because you have to have also a referendum, but you have to have an amendment where you have to abolish the party politics. You have to get rid of it. But nothing changes. This proposal, in my opinion, it doesn't change anything. Pretty much everything that you have in your constitution is going to stay the same. The only thing that is going to change is the formation of political parties. Get rid of that. And having direct independent representation in your parliament, your Congress, and the presidency. And this will boil down to all your local elections as well. This is going to be the norm. So basically, you're not going to have any party representation. You know, if you are going to elect candidate A or candidate B or candidate C, it's going to be candidate A who is going to go to Congress to represent District B or District C. He's not going to go to Parliament or Congress to represent himself and a party and his constituents. He goes there to represent the constituents that have elected him to Parliament. It's that simple. It's nothing complicated about it. So basically, the structures that exist right now is still going to stay. The only thing you are getting rid of is the parties. The labels. So now you're going to have a direct representation of the person that you have voted for. And that is how they are going to compete for that seat in any district. So now, also keep in mind that with all that said, you have to talk about the presidential aspect of it as well. With the presidential aspect of it, when members are elected to Parliament, the members that have been elected to Parliament will vote for two candidates. The two candidates that they will vote for are going to be the ones who are going to stand for the presidential election. Okay? So the two candidates, they will have the right to choose their own vice presidential running mates. And those two vice presidential running mates will run with their presidential candidates, and then whoever wins becomes the president and then the vice president. The other two candidates that loses will then go back to Parliament as before. Now, I have it set up with a two-track system. And the first track is what I just said. The second track is more about direct voting by the citizens, just like it is today for the presidential candidates. So basically, you're going to have, like, let's say, give and take about 8 or 10 presidential candidates. And then the first three vote getters of that presidential candidates will go into a runoff. Either the first 3 or the first 2. I mean, these are basically my proposals. So in terms of numbers, the countries themselves can come up and amend the numbers. in terms of how many people can go to the runoffs, or how many people that they would decide to allow to run for the first elections. So all these things are proposals that the countries will decide on their own in terms of the numbers. But the bottom line is simple. We have to get rid of party politics. That is the main issue. Get rid of it. And then let's deal with direct independent representation. I think the direct independent representation, you vote for candidate A, represents District A. That candidate goes to District A, sells his vision for District A. He gets elected, he represents District A. He doesn't have to worry about no party bosses sitting anywhere. Okay? Now let me make another point clear. I'm not saying that this thing is going to curb corruption entirely. No, it's not. I'm not saying it's going to curb corruption entirely. But you know what? I believe this will eventually reduce the level of corruption. Because one, remember, when these people are running for these offices in their districts, these are going to be individuals. So now they have to sell their ideas to their constituents. And the constituents are going to make decisions based on what this individual is presenting to them, or the individuals competing among themselves are representing. So it's not going to be about what party this person in and what party that person in. So now they are going to be voting for a representative based on ideas. And that is what a democratic society is supposed to be. So if they are going to vote for their representative based on ideas, then you know what? A candidate that presents the better ideas to its constituents will end up becoming the representative for that constituent. So that is number one. And also number two, like I stated earlier, you go back to the local governments. Okay, I know most African countries have this form of centralized government. I've never been a proponent of centralized government. Centralized government is the most corrupt form of governance in any society, because everything is kept at the top and has to trickle down to the people. But for this thing to take shape, the best thing for most of these African countries, or all these countries who are going to adopt this system, is to create a federal system. Is federal system a perfect system? It's not a perfect system, but I think it's the best system that can also eliminate a lot of corruption. Because one, you're going to have the federal government, and then you have states or regions, depending on how the country wants to set this up. Nigeria already has the federal system. So Nigeria is different with Nigeria, because you can emulate Nigeria's federal system. You can look at it and you will see pretty much the same in the United States of America. But let's say a country like Ghana. Ghana don't have a federal system. It has a centralized system. So basically what it does is that the president who becomes president appoints the regions, what they call regional ministers. And this same president appoints local district executives, and so on and so on and so on. We have to take all that back, because in the true democracy, power resides in the people. So what we have to do, now I'm referring to Ghana. What I'm proposing is basically that Ghana has to also go to the federalist system, where the regions, the various regions, will now have to have their own heads, thereby governors or head of the regions, or whatever name you call them. But by doing so, the people, the citizens of every region in that country, in Ghana, will vote for their leader in that region. And then also the third phase is going to be the local government. The local government. So you're going to have the central government, which is the federal executive. Then you have the regional government, which are the regions, the heads of the regions. And then within the regions, you have the local government, where the people will live among the communities, the locals. They will also have the right to vote for their mayors or their county executives or their heads within every community that they have, depending on how the communities are drawn. So basically, it's a three-step process. You have the executive, which is the presidency. Then you have the state level, which is the governor, or the regional level, which is the governor. And then you have the local government, which is representatives of the locals within each region. So basically now the power rests in the hands of the people. They're going to vote for their local representative within that community they live in to be their mayor. You don't need a centralized president sitting at the top picking who has to be a DC or whatever they call it, district executive or anything. Now you have the right to vote for who you want to represent you in that district. You know what I'm saying? So now, just like you are voting directly for your representatives to parliament, you're also going to be voting directly with no party labels to have who you want to be a mayor or who you want to be a regional minister or regional governor. And the regions will set up their own government to run their regions. And this template is nothing new, because this template is been in America has been doing this for how many years now? And I like to go back to America. Like I said, it was the first country to establish democratic form of government in the world in this modern era. No country did it. It was the United States. And if you look at the United States system, it has worked for how many years? Since 1776 or 1884, 87 or whatever, when they signed their constitution, this thing has been working. And this is the most stable government you can ever talk of in the world, is the United States of America. That's why most countries have confidence in America. At the end of the day, they have more confidence in America than anywhere, because the system works. And their political system, no matter what, has been able to work and is still working. So if we are going to emulate a country, there's no better country to emulate than the United States of America. So this is one area that I want the people of Ghana to look at. Okay? Now, I also have another proposal, which is a two-step process. After you have chosen the parliamentarians who represent their constituency in parliament, now we're also going to have another step, which we call the second house, which are called the governing council. The governing council is going to embody the chieftaincies, the trade unions, market women groups, business associations, the military, school unions, student associations, and as well as major farmers associations, all associations within the country. So basically they will have to cap it. Okay? The system itself will have to cap how to put these associations together. But what this is going to do is that these associations are going to be on the governing council. And they will also elect their representatives, which is every association will elect maybe 2 or 3 representatives to represent them on this governing council. Now, what this governing council will do is that, because this governing council embodies basically the whole country, the people of the country, what they will do, they will work in hand with parliament in terms of the agendas. So they will basically propose ideas, what agenda that the parliament will have to work in hand with them to put it in place for their country. So you get a feedback from these governing council members that will go to parliament, and then the parliament and these governing council members will work in hand for the benefit of the country as a whole. Okay? But like I stated earlier, all this is about good governance for the people of Africa. It's about good governance. The system that we have in place, it's already there. We don't have to do that much tweaking. I'm not talking about amending the whole constitution. We just have to get rid of the party politics. Get it out. That's all I'm asking for. Let's get rid of that. Let's go with direct independent representation through the system, through the presidential elections, local elections, regional elections, and congressional or parliamentary elections. So when we have that system in place, and then we're going to test this system, it's going to be a try and error. I mean, there's definitely going to have bumps. You know, I'm not saying this should be the final proposal. At the end of the day, when the civic societies of these countries decide to present this to their government, okay, now they can work together with the government to see which will be better for that particular country. Every country has its own cultures. So you cannot emulate one fits all systems. All right? So basically, the underlying proposal is getting rid of party politics. That is the underlying proposal, period. You're getting rid of the party politics if that thing is done. And this has to be done through constitutional amendment and referendum. Because when you do the referendum and constitutional amendment, you get rid of the party politics and then you put in place the system that I'm talking about. But before you put in place the system that I'm talking about, by then you have already, you have to have a study by, like I said, a group of civic society members of these countries. And they will look at the whole totality of the whole system and plug in the good things that will help and the bad things, plug them out. So this proposal is just a proposal. By the end of the day, it is up to the citizens of this country to decide which way to go. But at the end of the day also, it is not going to be an easy battle. That is what I want you people to understand. It is not going to be easy battle. This is going to be a very tough battle. Because remember, a lot of these politicians have been ingrained in this kind of system. Okay? This is their bread and butter. They are cronies. They are fraudulent, corrupt friends and families. They're going to put up a big fight. But you know what? Majority of people, if you believe that your government so far have not held up to what you expected of them for the past 30 to 40 years, then there's nothing wrong with taking this channel. There's nothing wrong with moving into a new direction. Okay? Because in the same great American Constitution, Thomas Jefferson had a quote in it. He said, government derives its powers from the governed, which is the people. And when government becomes destructive, abusive, not able to harness the interest of the people, it is up to the same people to get rid of that government and institute a new government that will make them happy, provide them security, and provide them economic and social liberties. So that is what I'm proposing. So, but for right now, there's no African country that you can do a survey, okay? A survey of its citizens that will tell you that they are happy with the kind of governments they've had for the past 40 or 30 years or 40 years. Because Africans have become independent, and an average independent African country is about, what's the give and take, 50 years of independence. And 50 years of independence, what do they have to show for? What do they have to show for? Look at the level of poverty. Look at the level of corruption. Look at the level of education in most of our societies. Unemployment. So at the end of the day, and all this has not been going well for us, not because of the corrupt societies that we have created. Okay, remember, even though we are going to the polls to elect our leaders, but because the judicial system of our countries are corrupt. If you have a corrupt legal system, it doesn't matter how many people you elect to parliament or you elect as president or whatever you do, you are still going to be in this situation. I always say one thing: give me a good judicial or legal system of a country and take away everything else. And you know what? You're way better off to have a rule of law in your country than to just go and vote for your political leaders. Because at the end of the day, the bedrock of every democracy is the rule of law. Rule of law is the bedrock of every democracy. If you don't have that rule of law in your countries, in your democratic system, you're not going to have a genuine democracy. And that is where we have our problems today in Africa. That is where our problem is. We have set up this electoral democracy process where we go and vote, by the foundation of it, which is supposed to be the rule of law, it doesn't exist. So there's no accountability. There's no accountability to the leaders that we have elected into office. It's become a money-making business in Africa now. Okay? Politics is the money-making business. People get into politics to enrich themselves and their cronies and their families. That's how it's been for the past 30 to 40 years in Africa. It's about time we change direction. And I hope this will serve to you, my fellow Africans, to look at your systems. Like I said, this is just a proposal. Okay? This is just a proposal. At the end of the day, the nitty-gritty of this is going to be by each country what culturally and based on their societies will fit into their system. But the most important thing is getting rid of the party politics. That is number one. That is number one. Getting rid of party politics. Don't let anybody fool you. There's nothing different from the proposal I'm making with what is in your systems right now. The only difference is that you don't have party labels attached to individual candidates anymore. Now you are holding the individual candidate you are electing to parliament, or who you are electing as president, responsible. You are not going there to vote because he's a member of this political party or a member of that political party. You are going there to vote because of what you believe he has proposed and what he intends to do for your benefits and the interest of the constituents that he's going to represent. So that is one. Okay. Now, I'm also going to talk about in terms of getting the civic societies to propose this referendum, because this is going to be a tough battle. Like I said earlier, it's not going to be easy. This is something that is going to drag on, because a lot of these politicians are not going to just lie low for you guys to come up with something. By the end of the day, go to the student groups, go to the business groups, go to the chieftaincy groups, go to every major group within your countries and present this argument to them. As the people get to understand this process, I believe about at least 80 to 90% of the citizens of your countries will agree on these changes. Because these changes have to come about. We have no choice. It has to come about. I mean, we cannot go the same road that we've been going on for almost 30 to 40 years now. We've been going on the same direction. At some point, you have to make changes. At some point, you have to make changes. And we have to make changes. You have to make changes. Because the parties have not represented our interests. The parties have represented the interest of the parties. So it has taken away the citizens' right to have certain benefits that's supposed to come with voting for a representative. And it's about time we do away with the party politics. Let's get rid of the party politics and move on to another experiment. I call it an experiment because that'll be the first experiment that I know of is going to happen in Africa. Okay? But in America, it's not an experiment because it was done from the very beginning, before party politics came in. But there's nothing wrong to experiment something, because if something else hasn't benefited you, then try something new. And if this becomes a success, then we keep it and we move on with it. And I believe this will become a success. Because like I said, there's nothing different. The only difference is that we are taking away the, what do you call it, the party labels. We are taking away the party labels and making it individual representation, because individual representation will be better. And two, the most important aspect of this all is also we're going to have what you call term limits. Term limits for every elections, political elections in our countries. Either 2 4-year terms or 2 5-year terms. Okay, so after 2 4-year or 2 5-year terms, when you finish serving, that means the first term you have to go for re-election. If you serve your first term, your second term, if you win again, you serve only 2 terms. After your second term, that is it. You are not coming back into politics anymore. That is it. You are done. Being the president or congressman or parliamentarian or regional executive or regional governor or local chairman or whatever, at the end of the day, each candidate will have the right to serve only 2 terms, either 4-year term or 5-year term, depending on the country and how they draw their term limits. But there has to be term limits. It's that simple. Nobody is born with anything to be serving anybody for the rest of their life. No. We have to have new ideas. That is what democracies are for. Have new ideas. So somebody comes in, serves 2 terms, goes, and somebody else comes in with fresh ideas. New generation with new ideas to build our countries. That's what democracies are for. And that's where we have to look. Instead of having one person sitting in office for 30, 40 years and all that nonsense. And every time we hear this argument that somehow, oh, he's been there so he knows. No. Okay? It's about time we start with this new process. Okay? Get rid of the party politics. Let's establish term limits. 2 terms. Either it's 4 years or 5 years for the presidency. Same with Congress or Parliament, whichever you call it in your countries. And then you do the same with your states or your regions. Okay, but these are the most important things with regards to my proposal. Is have an executive branch, which is the presidency. Then you have the Congress or the parliamentarian branch. And then you have the state level. And then you have the local level. All this will be entrusted into the hands of the people. So let the people go and vote for each position. There be the local mayor, state region governor, the presidential candidate, or parliamentarian or congressional candidate. Let the people make that decision. Let's give it to the people, because in the true democracy or a republic, the power rests in the hands of the people. So basically this is what I have to present. But I have the manifesto. I have it written down well. It's there. And when the time comes, I'm going to lay out all of it, the technical details of it. But right now, basically, this is just a summary of what I think will be better for Africans moving forward. Political party systems haven't done anything good for us. Let's get rid of it and move on. Okay? If it's Sunday, it's the Africa Weekly Talk. And you guys have a great week. Peace and love, and God bless you all.